And we're back. This is episode 408 of the Colombia Calling podcast. I'm Richard McColl. As you well know, my very special guest is Anika Fajardo, a Colombian in Minneapolis, Minnesota, up there in the frozen north. Welcome on the show, Anika.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's a real pleasure. Now, you see, you're a writer, you're an author of significant note, because the more I research you, the more comes up. It's all very favorable. Your first book, which is what really first drew me to your name, is called Magical Realism for Non-Believers, a Memoir of Finding Family. This is a topic that is covered by Colombians and others, of course, because of the whole diaspora. Perhaps you just give us a little bit of a background. I mean, how does a Colombian end up in Minnesota? I mean, it's not, Miami or Los Angeles or New York. It's Minnesota. It's, you're basically in Canada. Tell us a little bit more.
Yes. Well, so I'm not an immigrant. So I think that's part of, that's why the Minnesota thing. My mom is American, many generations of Minnesota family. And she ended up in Colombia, in Cali, when she was in college, and fell in love and didn't go back to college and got married. And so I was born in Colombia, in Popayan, and the international marriage didn't work out. And so I ended up being raised by my mother in Minnesota. And I went back to Colombia for the first time when I was 21 years old, 1995. And that's when I met my father. I mean, he had been around when I was a baby. He would actually been my primary caregiver when I was a baby. But first time in memory, I met him when I was 21 and sort of began this journey of figuring out this half of me that I didn't know anything about. So that's what the book is about, is that kind of that starting with that return visit, and then the journey through some of the idiosyncrasies that happen with international marriages and divorces and Colombian families and Colombian men, and kind of figuring out my own family also. Then this covers when I also have my own child.
Well, of course. So this is a real, question of identity. It's not just US or Colombian. It's far-reaching, isn't it? And of course, when you said you have your child, and it's how. I'm going through this now. My children are born and raised in Colombia, half Colombian, half English. And since obviously the lockdown and isolation and pandemic, I've not been able to take them overseas. And I'm very aware of this. I'm very aware of not being able to have my older one, who's 6, has been to England a few times. But my other one, has he left the country? I don't think so. He's 2. And it's hard. It's hard. But so this, there was so much in what you just said, and we'll come to some of it. 21 is an advanced age to sort of re-meet your father after so long. And was he still in Popayan, or was he in Cali?
No, he's lived his whole life in Popayan.
So he's Payanese. And tell me this thing of going down age 21. Did you feel a sense of identity and belonging returning to Popayan, or was it just a fresh new place, different culture? I'm a fish out of water.
Well, a little bit of both. And I think, so I was in college. He and I had no communication besides a few letters as I was growing up. My mom it was not a very good divorce. So she didn't encourage me to communicate with him. And so I first started writing letters to him when I was 16 or 17. And then he invited me, I spoke to him on the phone for the first time on my 21st birthday. And he said, we want to invite you. We want to send you a ticket to come to Colombia. And I had just spent a semester in Spain before that. And so I was pretty fluent in Spanish. And I thought I was this international traveler, and I was full of like the 21-year-old sort of, I can do anything sense. One more adventure. What is that? So I don't think I gave it a lot of thought. I just thought, okay, sure, a free trip, sure. um, and and I was expecting something closer to what I had experienced in Spain. So that was one kind of shock because, of course, it is nothing like Spain. And even the Spanish is nothing like Spain Spanish. But at the same time, I also had this feeling of like, oh, people look like me. I fit in suddenly. Because, yeah, I didn't grow up in Miami. I grew up in this very, very white Norwegian Scandinavian community where there, especially in the 80s, when I was growing up, 80s and 90s, there was very little diversity, especially compared to now even. So it was just kind of miraculous to me to look everywhere, to see all the brown hair everywhere. Like, it didn't take much for me to feel like, oh, I feel like I fit in. And then it was also great that my dad's wife is fabulous and we all got along. It took a little while for me to kind of acclimate to my father. But the other extended family was easier kind of.
Sure, I understand.
Blend into right away.
He had another family, but they, as you say, they embraced you.
Yes.
Which is amazing. Not always the case.
Right.
And did they look at you as being the pretentious one speaking with a Spanish accent as opposed to a Colombian one?
No, they were so nice.
Okay.
Everybody was so nice. And, actually, because Popayan, especially back then, was such a small city that a lot of people actually remembered when my mom lived there. And they remembered her, even people who were not related. So I was immediately just like brought into the fold, immediately felt like one of the family.
Amazing. So this was 95, and then you brought out the book in 2019.
Yes.
So a little while between. So it was a work in progress for some time as you reflected and, of course, had your family and so on. And the quote I most liked, that is written up in all of the blurbs, is, "He loved Colombia too much to leave it." This is something your mother said about your father.
Yes. And I think that this was, so the book came out in 2019. I started writing it in 2009, and I had a lot of trouble getting it published. And in those intervening years, I actually went back to Colombia and brought my daughter. She was 6 the first time we came, and that kind of gave me a new ending to the book. And I think that's why it finally found a home. But recently, my father and his wife actually visited here in Minnesota.
Wow.
In this past October. We kind of got this little window between Delta and Omicron that they could travel. And so I think that in a way, now I've realized that quote is a kind of an oversimplification. I think I understand a little bit differently now, but he is a homebody. He does love Popayan. He doesn't even like traveling, within Colombia, much less. He's in his 80s now, but he's never really liked leaving home. He's always wanted to be in his familiar space. And so I think it was partly that, and partly he was done moving around. He spent his teenage and college in upstate New York, and he lived in Canada for a while. So he spent time away from Colombia. But I think there was a pull. There's always been a pull there that he maybe doesn't always want to admit, but it is there.
But he came up. I mean, as you said, he's in his 80s, and he came up in October, which is, it's not an easy month either up there, and that's a big deal. That's a big deal. So I think you bringing your daughter down, age 6, obviously gave you the opportunity to see Colombia through her eyes, and therefore you finished the book on that. Tell us a little bit about writing this book. And I mean, you must have had, I would say, internal conflict. Am I writing this as a Colombian? Am I writing this as an American? Or am I just going to blend it into magical realism like you title the book? It's got to have been difficult.
I think that we all, you write for yourself, right? And so you don't really have this external view. I am writing this as, as a representation of anything. This was very much just very, very much my unique story. And readers have told me, oh, especially actually international adoptees have connected to this story. So it's almost closer to that than it is to the diaspora story, because it's got this weird kind of disconnect between these two countries. And I think a lot of the reason I was exploring this was to identify with my Colombian side, and to understand it better, which I think has been really helpful, especially for my daughter, who identifies strongly as being part Colombian. She's quarter Colombian, but she sees that as being a strong part of her identity. She has been there several times now, and then now with her grandpa coming to visit her, she really has more of a connection to Colombia even than I did growing up, because all my connection was once I was an adult. So it's been an interesting journey to kind of see that. And I've been able to let go, I think anyone who is mixed has a lot of feeling of not being enough of either side. And I think that seeing her interaction with kind of that identity, and of course having a book out, has helped me kind of just embrace, like, well, I'm just going to be what I am going to be. And when you're half and half, you can't be more or less of either, right? You're equal. You're equal on both of those.
I like that very much, that she has really, taken on that identity in the Colombian side. That's strong. I'm also curious here, in your first opening part, is you mentioned something about learning about Colombian men. I guess your mother talking about Colombian men and so on. I think we need to explore that a little more, because I'm always, I do know a fair amount of immigrants to Colombia, and they are usually bowled over by Colombian men. There's a certain degree of romanticism, and of course the men can dance. They're very good. Gift of the gab, nice, chatty, and so on. But then perhaps beyond that, there's some challenges. I don't know. What did your mum have to say?
Well, instead of telling you what my mother said, I'll tell you what my father said. Okay. Which, when I first went there, when I was 21, I was dating my now husband, and who's white and from Minnesota. And my father told me his advice to me when I was 21 was never marry a Latino.
Okay.
And he thought I was going to do much better staying with my now husband. And so I think that, there was some drama in their relationship, my mom and dad, and I think that he recognized that, and so he kind of laughs about that. I don't know that I don't think he remembers it. I don't think that he would own that exactly now, but I remember it very clearly, because when you're 21 and getting that advice from your father who you've just met, it sticks with you.
You're an impressionable age as well. I mean,
very impressionable.
The comment you made there about identifying more with sort of Colombian children adopted to the US or elsewhere is very interesting, because it's something that comes up a lot. I mentioned it indeed last week, because I know of quite a few people adopted overseas from Colombia. And again, this question of identity and sort of half and so on. It's because you're not, as you say, you're not an immigrant. There's a different story here. Have adoptees reached out to you to talk about this question? Because I think it's a fascinating thing to explore.
Yeah, I've had a couple adoptees actually from Asia who have told me, from Korea, who have said, I really identified with your experience. I had a young woman who was she wasn't adopted, but her family is from Somalia. And she was a young college age woman. And she told me this, she loved this book. And she said she identified with all of it. She doesn't speak Spanish. She has no connection to Colombia, but that kind of pull between two places, I think, was what she was identifying with, and kind of that searching of, where do I belong and which side should I identify, which side should I be, what should I call myself.
But I mean, it's clearly this is coming into your literature, and Anika has got a number of books out and another book coming out this year. And aside from what you've done other stories as well, but the crux seems to be identity. And it seems, there's so much on Colombia now. Obviously, I think Colombia is a wealth for stories, but you're looking at What If a Fish is the book you wrote in 2020, and it's kind of figuring out what it is to be Colombian, I think is the bit. And then you've got another book coming out in May of this year, 2022, saying Meet Me Halfway. And these last two books are both middle grade, but it's, again, sisters, I think, in Colombia. Mm-hmm. Colombia. So, you have adopted this. This is seriously. But most exciting and most, for me, most sort of the actual time is you wrote the accompanying book for the movie Encanto.
Yes.
That's incredible.
It was amazing. Yes.
Tell us, because Encanto is obviously being marketed and now as the greatest sort of publicity for Colombia. Here it's heralded as turning the page on various things, trying to block out things like, let's say, Narcos and other things. Encanto, this, again, charming comic strip that it is. Overseas, friends of mine have written to say that they're taking their kids to see it. They have nothing to do with Colombia, but they're taking their children to see it and so on. My family's seen it. I haven't. That's my disclosure here. But you got to, so as you were writing it, they were making the film.
Yes.
How does that work?
Well, so I actually, it happened because of What If a Fish. The editor at Disney found me through that book because it's about a half Colombian, half Minnesota boy who goes to Colombia. And so she wanted an author to write the middle grade novel for Encanto. And so I wrote it last spring, and the script was actually was still being written while I was writing the book. So they would send me the script, and so I would write the book. The novel is written from the from alternating points of view of the three sisters that are in the movie. And so I would write, and then I would send it in, and they would tell me, oh, no, that's not what happens now. So then I would write it, read the new script and then change the plot a little bit. Or they were actually changing the personalities of these sisters as I was writing it. So it was very exciting to kind of try to keep up with these things.
Exciting and demanding.
It was very demanding, and I've never worked with a script before. And so I had to kind of learn what a movie script looks like and how it works and what are all these different meanings that are in, kind of some slang and things that they use in script writing, which I was not familiar with. And I saw a very, very early kind of sketch take of the movie. Like it was literally in sketch form, much of it, or partially animated, and that kind of gave me a sense of, kind of visually what was happening in the film. So when I saw it for the first time, I saw it in the movie theater for the first time. I thought, oh, that's what they did with that part. Oh, that's what they were imagining as they were writing that scene. And there are a few changes, I think, that happened between when I finished the book and the movie came out. So it's not a complete exact version.
No, but it's kind of incredible to now be totally associated to that. You look at your Amazon profile, or you look at your your website. There it is, Encanto. I'm like, the first thing I think is she wrote Encanto, but then but it's a huge deal. It's Disney and so on, and it's Colombia, and in fact, my friend's hotel in Quindío or Armenia. Armenia is in Encanto. No, it is the hotel that inspired it, Hacienda Bambusa. Have you visited any of the places that inspired parts of this?
No, not that I know of. I don't think so.
Oh no, and this, this Encanto. You were obviously sworn to secrecy while you were working on it, so nothing could leak out.
Yes, the level of secrecy with Disney that was an experience in and of itself.
I mean, do they threaten to break your legs or something?
Well, maybe that's in the small print, but my favorite was that when I was screening this first version, they actually, there's a window of time, then you could watch it, and you were instructed to close all the curtains in the room you were watching it in.
Wow.
I thought it was really funny.
The curtain, I mean, so it might have been like professional spies.
Right. Right. It was fascinating.
It is.
That was my favorite. Just kind of the lore of working for Disney was my favorite.
Oh, of course. And I bet your daughter was just thrilled that you were working on this.
Yes, and she's been getting she's in high school now, but she's still getting a lot of street cred right now, and she tells her classmates and her teachers that I worked on this novel.
Well, now that let's say that this security clauses are hopefully lifted, can you tell us if anything really changed? I mean, what was taken out that could have been in there? I mean, are we going to get a special editor's edition later on with the parts?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing I think is that as they were writing it, they were having some sensitivity readers reading it, and so they did make some adjustments on some of the characters, especially the darker skinned characters, to make sure that they were positive representations. So I think that those things are for the better.
Okay, so sensitivity readers, interesting. Mm-hmm. So obviously people, obviously, I mean, I would say experts, academics, and people with knowledge of all of the, I guess, race, culture, gender, and so on, saying this, you can't do this, you should do this, and was there anything that came up while you were writing it, going, I don't think that's Colombian, or I don't think this should go in? Was there anything there for you?
Well, for me, having, obviously my memoir uses the term magical realism, and the story, to me, from my reading of magical realism and sort of what that means, the movie is magic, not magical realism. And so that is definitely something that stuck out to me to kind of wrap my head around, actually, as a writer of this book, to remember we are actually talking about straight up magic. I mean, the family has magical powers, and that's not what you see in traditional kind of magical realism literary device, right? It's not, you shoot things out of your fingertips or anything. So that was one of the things that surprised me that they had gone that way. But I mean, that's sort of very Disney, right? To do straight up magic. That's sort of the Disney way.
Yeah. And it has to appeal to a younger generation who might not be so aware of the suggestion of magical realism, let's say.
Right.
Things, but the image behind the image, or reading between the lines. If you've got the magic, we know it's magic.
Right. Right.
Fascinating. And so you're saying now, I mean, you've got this book coming out, but where do you go from here? Because I mean, Disney is huge. I know that you teach at Augsburg University and the Loft Literary Center, up where you are in Minnesota. Have there been just a ridiculous flood of signups for your classes now that everybody knows you worked on Encanto?
No, I'm like the most successful, least known person.
Oh no.
I primarily teach nonfiction, so memoir writing. So Encanto does not change that. I'm hoping that this means that more projects come to me, especially projects from Disney. I wouldn't mind. And I'm hoping, of course, that this connection will, make people more interested in reading both What If a Fish, which is a really quiet, and it's not Encanto, it's very quiet, kind of introspective story of identity. But I hope people meet me halfway, and just maybe be more interested in my work.
Well, I'm sure they will. And Disney, if you're listening, I mean, there we are. That was a shout out from Anika there.
Yes.
She wants more work from you, Disney.
Bring me work.
I'm now fascinated is that you are teaching nonfiction. I'm writing nonfiction, but I can't get my book into any editorial house. What should I do? Here we go. There's a question for you.
Oh my goodness. Well, the first advice I was people is to write for yourself because you might never get it published. I struggled to get my book published for many years. And I think part of it is that when we write about our own stories, we think they're ready before they're actually ready. Because we, in our minds, have thought about it and have processed these things for a long time, but that doesn't always show up on the page for a while. And having perspective on your life experience, you need some distance. And I think that's really frustrating for a lot of people. It was certainly frustrating for me that you have to live your life before you can really analyze it or write about it creatively. So that's the reality. Publishing a personal essay and memoir is just really hard because everyone has an interesting story and not everyone can tell it in an interesting way. The trends are crazy.
That's the trends is, this last year 2 books came out on the river, on the Magdalena River, or last year and a half. So you got Wade Davis, who was on the show in his book Magdalena, and then Jordan Salama, who's Every Day the River Changes, about the Magdalena River. And my book, my manuscript, deals with my time in Montpos, which is now up to 15, 16 years. And what flows past Montpos? Well, the Magdalena River. So it's a crowded field. I'm going to have to wait another 10 years.
Well, either or that means you're ripe for it. Sometimes there needs to be just, 3 might be the magic number. Maybe this is your chance.
You're very, very positive, and I appreciate that immensely. Thank you for that. But that's very helpful to I actually did do quite a large step back during when I should have been writing, probably during the pandemic and isolation. But in truth, I was living my life a bit, and I finished up a doctorate and writing on that and so on. So I think that was stepping back, and it's actually given me a greater sense of what perhaps needs to go down on the page again. So I've been re-immersing myself slowly into it. But I'm a parent. Business is only just picking up for my hotels. You got to make ends meet too.
Exactly.
That's the truth. And so tell me about Meet Me Halfway. But this is the book that's coming out in May. This is very exciting. And as you said, you're hoping that Encanto will draw more people to Meet Me Halfway. It's a story of sisters in Colombia.
They're in the US.
Okay, sorry, yes.
In California. What if a fish had half brothers who were 10 years apart? Meet Me Halfway has half sisters who are the same age. And both of those stories influenced by my own experience and kind of processing my own experience. And I mean, the idea of what if is my favorite kind of jumping off point. And so, spoiler for my memoir is that I have a half brother who is almost my same age. And so that's kind of where this idea came from, is what if we had met when we were young? And so in Meet Me Halfway, these 2 sisters meet when they're 12 years old in middle school, and they look alike. They look identical. Almost identical. And so they realize right away, pretty soon, that they're half siblings, and their father they've never met their father, but he is Colombian. He's a Colombian anthropologist who spends all his time in the field. And so he's totally gone. And then they discover that he's actually teaching nearby. And so they set off to find him. So it's a sort of a 12-year-old version of a road trip adventure where they go and they do not get along at all. They're very different. So they kind of have to navigate getting along with each other, and they have this shared goal of trying to find their father and to meet him for the first time.
This all sounds very much taken from your life. Indeed, is your dad an anthropologist? Can I just ask?
No, my dad's wife is an anthropologist.
There you go. The osmosis between one parent and then his wife. And did you get?
And she did a lot of help. She really helped me find. I used some mythology from the Arauco people. And so she helped me find some of these different mythologies that, I can't find here in English. So I didn't really even know where to start to do some research on Colombian mythology. The story has some themes of mythology, both kind of Greek mythology and then Latin American mythology.
And your half brother, who's almost your age, was there friction then? Is this where it's coming from?
No,
No.
yeah, no.
Okay, perfect. And I think it's great. I think it's, I think, we all, I mean, families, aren't they? They are kind of crazy, and we just
Yes.
have to, we have to just kind of take them as they are. But Colombian families, how big is your family in the US, and how big is your family in Colombia? I mean, because Colombian families tend to be quite large.
My family is quite small, actually. I am
really?
an only child. I grew up just with my mom and my grandparents here in Minnesota. And then I have a half brother, but I didn't know him growing up at all. I didn't meet him until I was an adult. And my dad didn't have any other children. So he just has his 2 American kids.
Okay, but then you went down and met the extended family.
But I have some cousins, and then my dad's wife comes from a humongous family. So, I never can keep track. I think there's 10. I don't know.
Well, see,
there's a lot of them.
On one side, so on my wife's maternal side, there are 12 uncles and aunts. I mean, and I tell you a secret is that I'm allowed special dispensation to not go to family events because it's just too many. I go to one, and then I've ticked the box for the rest of the season. It's just too much sometimes,
It's a lot. That's a lot. That is a lot.
And then because it's just sometimes I just don't remember some of the names, because I remember the key ones, but then after that, when we start extending into second cousins and third, I'm really not sure.
Right.
And I probably met them, a dozen or more times, and so you should know their names by now, but it's yeah. It's when I start using the royal we in Spanish and things like that, when I start referring to everyone at once.
Exactly.
So, I mean, your work is, I mean, it's kind of incredible. So, since 2019 to have so many books out and to have worked in Encanto. Are we going to take a break anytime soon? Are you going to have to pause and say, this is now for my next thing, I'm going to take some time?
I am taking some time. I am hopefully this doesn't jinx this. I am, knock on wood. I am working on an adult novel, which is really my dream, to write an adult novel. And it will be the same exact, I will write about identity and Colombia and American identity for my whole life. I think it's there's endless things to say and endless things for me to think about. Of course. So I am working through that right now, and I'm excited, but it's also weird to be at the beginning of a project after being at the end of the projects for the last few years.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it seems like you must have been writing them, concurrently. It's well, that's a good one for another one, and so you got sort of 3 files open at once. What I've got a question for you, because one of my dreams that I'm sort of putting into action now is to open and start my own publishing company here from Colombia, but dedicated to books in English about this area of Latin America. There is a market for it. I mean, and you're showing me this by talking about these Colombian, I mean, and I would say typically Colombian stories, but that appeal, and you mentioned it too, to others. As you said, your friends from Asia and so on have said, listen, I think there's a market for it. I don't think it's going to be, unfortunately, groundbreaking or earth-shattering, but I think there is a market for it. And so this has given me a little bit more impetus. I have 3 scripts. 3 documents have been sent in, so that's positive.
Wow.
I've got them. I've got one. One is really long. I mean, this is it's divided up. You can see it into double page.
Oh my goodness.
Page. So this is easily more than 400 pages I've got on this one to go through.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. I already know that we're going to have to sort of pare it down, but it's exciting. What is your experience with editors? Do you have when you send it in to your editor, do you have a friendly relationship, or do you end up cracking heads as this cannot be cut out and this cannot be changed? Tell us a little bit.
Well, so my editors have been fabulous. For the memoir, I actually had 2 manuscripts that I had been working through based on various advice. I had a sort of essay, nonlinear manuscript, and then I had a chronological manuscript that someone had advised me to write. And neither of them were getting published. And when I finally met my editor, I told him about these 2, and he liked them both. But we went in, actually, I mean, this is back in the day when you could meet in person. We met in person and we looked at them, and we talked about how to put them together. And so I wove them together. I literally spent a weekend at a cabin and just cut apart the manuscripts and literally taped and stapled them back together. And the editor kind of helped me work through some of the, how do we deal with this kind of time issue? How do we deal with this theme? How do we keep these pieces together? Where should it start? Where should it end? So he was instrumental in being able to put it together in a book that would work for other readers. And then my editor for the middle grade novels she's actually Puerto Rican, and she had just visited her grandmother in the mountains in Puerto Rico when she first got my manuscript, where the boy goes to Cartagena and meets this abuela. And so she was really accepting of, like, how do we push this feeling of being in Colombia? How do we push this, the sensory, and, let's really dig into that. And so that's been really helpful. The last round of editing that happens is copy editing. So that's like grammar and punctuation and just like the nitpicky stuff. Yeah. And those copy editors, which I've worked as a copy editor, I'm trained as a copy editor. So I know the how close you have to follow rules. But they tend to be so rule-based that they will suggest that things shouldn't be the way that you've written them. And, I'll give you an example, my most recent manuscript, I said something about the scent of green, and the copy editor said, well, green doesn't have a scent. You can't say that. And so that's the kind of thing that my editor, then I can say, no, I'm going to leave that because this is my writing. And so my editor, of course, has got my back on that as I push back on that kind of more nitpicky things.
I can imagine the scent of green. I can imagine it. And as a description, I can imagine it, definitely. Of course, I've got an idea of, freshly cut grass or something. But I can imagine it, or, or kind of a jungle smell or something. I went, that's pretty exciting. And so I'm going to say, well, not only congratulations on all the previous publications, but congratulations most on Encanto, because obviously this is the Colombian flag to the world right now until the next one, but for the time being, it's really, something that's very positive. I think we should not try and over intellectualize Encanto, but some people do. Yes. And if you go onto Twitter, that's where the hatred lives. And,
it is.
It's true. And that's where and people end up over intellectualizing things. Just take it for what it is, as you said, magic. Magic. And also, I wish you the best of luck for Meet Me Halfway, out May 2022.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. So everyone, check out Anika's website. That's Anika Fajardo, Anika Fajardo, as the presidential hopeful surname. And of course, she's on Instagram as well, Anika Writer, as you can find her everywhere. And so if you have young children, between the ages of sort of 8 and 12, that's middle grade, there are these books. You've got Encanto, you've got What If a Fish, and you've got Meet Me Halfway. Support writers, buy the books. Thank you so much for your time, Anika.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. So we've been talking to Anika Fajardo, who's up there in Minnesota. Next week, we'll be back on the Colombia Calling podcast. I have a person who's been working alongside forensic investigators in Colombia and, of course, doing studies in that field and how it pertains to the HEP, that's the Jurisdicción Especial para la Paz, and the Truth Commission, and so on. So always keeping it different, jumping around between subjects, but always Colombia related. Of course, remember to support us on Patreon patreon.com/Colombia Calling, or just give us a one-off donation at kofi.com. That's KO-FI, and you can find Colombia Calling. Thank you again to Anika Fajardo. Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll be back again next week. Bye-bye.